Communications 2 class to take 8 weeks of the course and teach these students how to program. She developed this curriculum in such a way that it helped them understand these concepts of variable and function that they're learning right at that same age and that they sometimes struggle with. She walked into class on the first day of class. Com 2 is not a required course. Communications 1 is. And in fact, in the state of Utah, we have a group advocating that by 2020, we prepare people to have to be prepared to come into the technology sector especially. I read a report just today that of the best cities in the nation for a job outlook. Somebody said something. It was, has anybody seen this report? The mayor promotes it on his blog. He's like, hey, look, where Provo lands. Guess where Provo lands for job prospects? #1 in the country. Guess who #2 is? Logan. And #4, Salt Lake. And Ogden is #13 or 11. I can't remember, somewhere in there. Utah has a great job prospect, and often what they're talking about there is the technology sector. They're saying this is a great place for people. There's great opportunity, training opportunity. The universities were considered into this. And one of the things that they're looking at as they look at these opportunities that students have is they're saying we need people to be ready. So a lot of people say, well, we're going to give them iPads and technology in the classroom. Gimme, gimme, gimme. But that is not really the solution they're looking at. Even though Utah is kind of held up there as an innovation center for technology and pushing people forward, the problem is that there are only 2 required technology courses in all of our K-12 learning. You guys know what those are?
Typing,
keyboarding, and Communications 1, which has to cover pretty much everything under the sun. So that's the only required course. So back to my student, Com 2, she walks in, first day of class, second semester, so it's January. 34 students in the course. Guess how many were girls? 2. That's exactly right. 2 of the 34 students were girls. They dropped out in the first week. There's no way they were going to stay in there with that many boys. Already in 7th and 8th grade, students are self-selecting out of the types of courses that get them thinking toward the future and understanding technology and engineering. It's interesting. I have a 7th grader in one of these courses this year in Com 1, and it's by far his favorite course. He comes home and he tells me all about it. And I'm not saying that's the reason that we need people doing this. What I'm saying is that we know from research by 4th grade, there are several demographic groups that are selecting themselves out of technology and engineering careers. For some reason, they're not seeing the value in this, even at a young age. So my research, what I'm working on, and I'm not going to go on too much further, is we're trying to help teachers, elementary school teachers, teach kids engineering and technology related concepts and ways of thinking at an early age. We don't want everybody to become an engineer, but we also don't want everybody to become a chemist or all of these other things that we teach in school. What we want is we want them to learn the value of the engineering design process. We want them to learn to think like designers and engineers and to learn to think like computer programmers and to give them the skills and the disposition to solve problems as they move into a technological future, which is the world that they're going to be inheriting. So I work with trying to teach teachers how to teach technology and engineering, especially to young children. And as we work with kids, one of the ways in which we've done that is by having them design games and develop games. And so there's another aspect of my research, which I won't talk about, which is the design and development of games for learning. So I've taken up more than my time, so I'm going to end right there and turn the time over to Royce.
I didn't bring my dongle. That's fine. So I just presented recently, so I'm not going to take a lot of time. As a new faculty member, I'm good. One of the things that I have to learn to do is to take all of these, like you do as students, take all of these interests you have and to focus them down, right? And to package it up and kind of realize, what is it that you're most interested in? And I think that I've already shared with you kind of the breadth of the things that I'm interested in. But now I kind of just want to share with you kind of how I envision that. And the way that I envision it is that I'm really interested in open literacies. I'm interested in, or what I call open education literacy. So I'm interested in the issue of openness and how it impacts us as teachers, as students, as institutions. That relates to the types of resources we use and also the types of data we use and how we use that. What are some open resources that you guys use every day? Wikipedia. What is the value of Wikipedia?
Knowledge.
If we were to put a number on it,
Oh.
like what is the worth of Wikipedia in terms of dollars? Do you think? Do what? So it's estimated it's about worth about $10 billion. And at any time, Wikipedia could go. They could put advertisements on their site. They could sell it. They could lock it down, but they don't. And I think it's very interesting that they don't. I mean, there are lots of reasons for that. But we find ourselves, as a result of the internet, in a space where value is not the same as dollars that we spend for things. There was just an article released in Huffington Post this week or last week about open educational resources, really asking, do you get what you pay for in terms of textbooks? And I think that we are in a very exciting time right now when we are fundamentally rethinking a lot of our practices in terms of what does have value in education, what does have value for us as people, who are we as we share information and resources online. And to just give you some concrete ideas of things that I'm doing right now and projects that I'm working on. So one of the things I'm studying right now is Twitter. I think Twitter is really fascinating. We said Wikipedia has a value of about $10 billion. What do you think Twitter is worth?
$15 billion.
It's more, yeah, it's more. It's about $30 billion. This is a platform that releases all their data openly. So it's a $30 billion platform. Anyone can go in and access the data. You can have access to information put up by pretty much anyone that uses Twitter. So we're studying Twitter from an institutional perspective, how are institutions using it, how are educators using it. Studying educational resources, I'm really interested in what are the literacies necessary for a person to use educational resources and to be an open educator. And also I'm studying students' uses of technology. So one of the things that we've done before is we have used students' web browsers to track what they do over time. And so we're going to do that. So I have an IRB in to do that for next semester with students here in the College of Ed that are willing to participate to try to understand what resources they use, what are the value of those resources for their education and for their well-being. So I realize that's kind of broad, but you know, I really am intrigued by kind of just the space that we're in right now as a society, and the different people that I look to that I think are really intriguing. If you haven't, looked at any of these folks, are David Wiley obviously is an exciting person in this field. George Siemens and Larry Lessig, and they're kind of the people that I look to that they are doing the most exciting things for me in this field, and so they're the ones that I look to, and I think, wow, that's the kind of work that I want to do. So I mean, I've met with a lot of you, and again, I've shared more with you in the past, but I guess I just wanted to share with you that's kind of my vision of what drives me. I want to understand better what is the future of education in this increasingly open and connected world. Thanks.
Okay. I have the floor. That means I get to ask you statistical questions. I love this part. All right. Line. Didn't know you were doing a quiz about your Statistical Knowledge Day. There you are. Line represents an acronym for the assumptions of linear regression. What are the assumptions that you have to meet in order for linear regression to work? Linear. Good job, we got one. Independence. Very good. Normality. And I like to throw in outliers in here. Outliers. And say it louder, please. This also, I could put H here as well. Does that help anybody? It's a word that I can never pronounce, so I usually use this one.
Hermeneutic.
Hermeneutic, terminology. Yeah, very good. Equality of variance. Homoscasticity of residuals. I can never pronounce the words. Equality of variance means the same thing. That's what we just said. Okay. So you need all these four things in order for your linear regression to give you results that you can believe in. What happens if these assumptions are violated? How bad does it need to get before you start disbelieving the results? Pick one. Let's do linearity. How non-linear does your relationships have to get before you start, linear regression starts falling apart?
A lot.
Say it louder, please.
Somewhere between 0 and 1. Somewhere.
Yeah, some number is associated with that thing. How would you study that question?
Asking you about it?
Yeah. This is my work, so that's obviously the things. What was that? Qualitative inquiry? Yeah. So you go around and interview people. How does this look linear to you? Do you believe the results? Okay, that's one way to approach. Yes.
Asking like professionals in the field who do a lot of this stuff, like where is their...
So there really is qualitative inquiry. Yeah. So you do kind of survey, but I want an empirical case rather than just people's opinions. How would I answer the question that way?
You might look at prediction rates and how often it's accurate and not accurate when it was linear.
Very good. Very good. The way I would try to answer that question, this is my work, is through a simulation study. Step one, I would create data. So much fun creating data using programs. But one thing, you don't need IRB. My dissertation, my whole entire RV page was, this is create simulated data. That was it. It was beautiful. And so that'll save you a lot of time right there. Then you violate the assumptions in that created data. Finally, you apply linear regression. So I'm going to create data that is nonlinear. And I'm going to vary how nonlinear it is by a wide array of nonlinear myths that I will define. I will apply regression, not pretending that it is linear when it is not, and compare the results from the analysis to the actual truth. And I know the truth because I created the data. So I can say with surety, after doing a study like this, this is how much the lack of linearity will affect your linear regression results. That's the kind of work I do. Specifically, I have interest in missing data, complex missing data designs. For those of you who've seen my little missing data lecture, you'll understand what that means more. And I'm going to use big words here, so if you don't understand what that means, don't feel bad. Just take one of my SEM classes and then you'll understand it afterwards. Latent class analysis is another one I'm very interested in. to see what are the assumptions of latent class analysis, and what cases does latent class analysis work under what situations. And another area I'm working on right now is propensity score matching. Who's heard of that one? One person here. All right. I've got Richard. Richard Sudwick says heard of that one, right? That. Propensity score matching is a way to try to get experimental results when you have non-experimental data. When does it work? When doesn't it? What happens if you have more than two groups with your propensity score matching? Those are the type of questions I ask. And like I said, what do you not need? IRB. And so y'all should be stampeding to my office just to avoid the IRB. Any questions of what I do?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know how to ask the questions though.
So if you take the stats sequence in our department, stats 1, stats 2, and then hierarchical linear modeling, or structural equation modeling, that's where you can diverge, then you can start thinking of questions that you want to ask about the methodology yourself. I admit that this is not a measurement-only department, but for those of you who are interested, you can work with me and people like me. There's a few of us in the world, and answer this type of questions. Any other questions?
How did you get into this? Like, how did you think, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to research? Has this always been a passion of yours?
No, that's a really good question. Statistics is the art of solving problems, and that's what really attracted me to statistics. And in my PhD in statistics vanilla, they wanted me to prove the potential limit theorem again. I wasn't interested in doing that. I was interested in solving real world problems in education. And so that's how I get into this work, the simulation work, the Monte Carlo work, was actually trying to answer questions about what the applied researcher comes up against. Not just works in fantasy math land, but when you're actually sitting down with a data set, what procedures are best to use in what circumstance? So that's how I got into this work. Good question. And I guess any other last questions? All right, so you'll remember this forever. What line? If you get me in as a reviewer in one of your journal articles, I will look for this. So it really will be quizzed, don't you? Thank you very much.
So, what I'm interested in is looking at everybody else's research and judging it. Actually, I do two things. My area of expertise is program evaluation. All my evaluation students are laughing because we had a big discussion on what evaluation is and whether it involves judgment or not and things like that. But program evaluation and assessment, how do we test measurement, or how do we measure learning? Those are the two areas that I teach. My research agenda happens to be evaluating programs that use technology, and how do we integrate it, and how do we make it work. And so I do a lot of looking at not just what, but why these things are looking at. So for instance, I'll look at Peter's work with PISA, and I'll say, let's put the PISA results in context, and let's determine whether or not they actually do compare countries or not well, and the answer is no. The second thing I might look at is something like Royce's OER, and we did a study where David was looking at the cost of OER things. He says, look, this costs $5, this costs $50. Obviously, this is much better, and we're saving all this money. And so we did an evaluation along with that same evaluation to ask the students simple question of, do you use the textbook? And the answer was no. Therefore, you're comparing costs, but the value of that learning is in context is that neither of them used it, so maybe we should just do away with textbooks and save a lot of money. The answer is no, but we should. It's not always no. Sometimes it depends, but that's where we are with that. And so we look at evaluating programs, understanding why it is that we get the results that we get in context. And so I do a lot of work with different entities around the university. We're doing program evaluations with applied math and with engineering and with the Merit School of Business. And so we're looking at working with people that are doing projects and helping them understand and do well what it is that they're doing, what it is they're studying, not just a narrow focus on, say, test scores or something like that, but the context around it and what the value is, feasibility of it is, and things like that. Most recently, I'm working with several students on data analytics and understanding not just, like Peter said, that it's not good enough just to give people a laptop or an iPad, but what do you do with it? You know, how do you use that? And when you do implement technology, how do you get the most of it? And so a lot of the, say, LMSs that are trying to use data use assessment data. Well, so that's another area that I've got a little soapbox that I can bring out and talk about, but not today. Where we look at, is this good enough just to look at assessment results? Or do these assessment results need to be tied to specific learning concepts and reported in that way? And then deeper than that, how do we use process data to actually understand this and make that data diagnostic, and how do we make it actionable? So what do we do with the data once we get it? And we're studying those kinds of things. So if you're interested in doing some program evaluation work or some work with technology integration, I'd be interested in talking to you. Thank you.
Okay. So I think you all know who I am. Most of you probably know about what I do, so I'll be brief, but I have two major areas of interest. One is design practices, which is my way of saying I'm interested in what it is that instructional designers particularly do when they're out in the world of everyday work in their organizations. How do they cope with the demands of the job, and what sort of resources do they find most useful? If we teach them things here in the university, how do they use them out there? Do they use them at all? And what's it like in enculturation processes, integrating into work life, and that kind of thing. So we do a lot of different studies along those lines, usually qualitative, but it doesn't have to be. And the other major interest of mine is focused on agency and learning. It's trying to understand the nature of learning, but some of us have this prior notion that any account of learning is going to have to entail some notion of what it is to be a human in the first place. The kind of being that goes around doing this particular kind of learning, and so we're trying to figure this out. And muddle our way through different ways of understanding basic issues, like really basic social science issues having to do with human action and choice and motivation and so on, and then try to make some headway there based on lots of different research that's out there in the field and theorizing and kind of coming up with our own best way forward and what we think is our best way forward. And then also, then if that's true, if that's the case, then what does that imply for learning? And so that's kind of what we do. We have this idea that if you are going to be out there teaching somebody or something, working on somebody or something, you ought to know what it is that you're teaching or working on. Right? And so if you're going to be a truck mechanic, you really need to know about like what trucks are and how they work. And if you're going to be a gardener, you need to understand the principles of gardening. And if you're going to be trying to teach somebody, you ought to know what it is for that person to exist and to learn, that sort of thing. So trying to tackle that, and lots been done on it. We're trying to see if we could open up in some new ways and help us take agency a little more seriously in some of these discussions. So that's all.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Richard Sudweeks. I came to BYU a long time ago from Syracuse University, where I worked there for a few years. Before that, I did my graduate work at the University of Illinois. My focus is educational measurement and also assessment and evaluation. I think you all have copies of the list of my research agenda. We're currently writing the journal articles for 2 studies that we did last year. well, one of them is completed, the other one is still ongoing. The completed one was a study of grade inflation at BYU over a 20-year period from 1994 to 2013. And we found that grades were not very much inflated. The average grade across about 7 million grades that were given in that period of time increased from 3.26. I guess you'd call that B plus minus. It's between a B and a B plus. Increased from 3.36 to 3.34. So a 0.08 increase. I wouldn't exactly call that inflation. During that same time, the average ACT scores from entering freshmen increased to about 28.6. And the number of advanced placement courses that students brought to the university when they entered the university increased from about 13 to about 20. So we had a more selective admissions policy over that period of time that would influence that grade increase. If any of you are more interested in that study, it was done with an IPT graduate student who graduated last summer. She'll be reporting the details of that Friday in the EIME seminar 2 floors down directly under us here. That's Friday at noon. In that study, we compared average grades among categories of colleges at BYU. We categorized all the colleges as to whether their primary grading was basically norm referenced or criterion referenced, more of a mastery based approach. And then there were a bunch of colleges that were somewhere in between because different departments use different policies. So that's part of that study as well. We've since been asked to do a follow-up study by the College of Engineering and by the College of Family Sciences where we do the same approach with comparing departments in those colleges. So essentially this is using applied regression, as Dr. Larson was talking about, in a kind of a time series fashion over a period of years with splines to compare whether there is grade inflation and what accounts for that, and basically the main differences of different grading philosophies among the various academic units. We're also working on a study that we're writing a proposal right now to examine archive data, that's existing data that collected by the state over the last 5 years to compare graduation rates among high schools across the state. You might be aware that the federal government has put a lot of pressure on high schools in the last few years to increase their graduation rates. There are a lot of reasons why some schools have lower graduation rates than others. We're trying to compare those using multi-level modeling with data, doing a longitudinal study over the last 5 years. If you're interested in that, I'd be interested in talking to you. And we're also writing a proposal with 2 teachers in teacher education to study the prevalence of science misconceptions on the part of elementary school teachers. You're probably aware that elementary school teachers are not really majors in chemistry or physics or biology or earth science even, and yet they're expected to teach that. Well, it turns out that it's fairly common for elementary school teachers because they're like the rest of us. We often have misconceptions about scientific principles that we're unaware of. An example would be if you ask people why we have 4 seasons in a year. People often say, well, it has to do with the distance of the sun from the earth, and they forget that the real reason for that is because of the tilt of the earth's axis. That's an example of a science misconception. Hopefully elementary school teachers would know the real principle there instead of having a misconception. So there are a number of widely identified misconceptions that are prevalent, common misconceptions. Everybody has their own idiosyncratic misconceptions, but we're studying the common misconceptions and how prevalent they are among elementary school teachers in Utah. Thank you.
he can't be here. So we'll put Dr. West up on the screen. Any day now.
Someone else have a joke?
That's right.
What did the gangster say when the house fell on top of him? Step off, Holmes. Oh my God, guys, I'm sorry.
We appreciate the seminary teachers in the room. Make humor. Alright, we're gonna try this. We'll try that. We'll try this again.
You could tell these all day and I'd be like,
Yeah, internship.
should probably do something Laffy Taffy and instructional design. Someone get married or two.
I'm gonna get it up another way. Come on. It doesn't seem to like it. Let's try the tech display. Let's try and get it this way.
It wasn't working on the HDMI cord?
Yeah, it didn't work off of mine, so I'll just try it here really quick. My fingers on the right keys here. Alright, you guys, when you see all that stuff, we'll go Dr. West. Here's his video. Download it. Open my QuickTime. See what it says. There it is.
Hello everyone, sorry I couldn't be there with you today, but I'm excited to tell you a little bit about some of the projects that I do. Many of you have heard me talk about these projects before, but if you want to talk about them with me more in depth and how you might be able to be involved, I'd be happy to schedule a meeting with you. If you go to my website, which is at richardewest.com, there is a tab for students, and under the For Students tab there's a list of my current projects. So you can go there and look at what I've got there, some of the things that I'm working on now or that I could be working on if I had the right student team come together. So you can go look there for some potential opportunities. But basically, I have three things that I work on. One is in the area of collaborative creativity. As we see here from this study by Edelman, that most people feel like creativity is really important to their career, and they wish they had been taught creativity while in college. And they say as a course, but I don't think it has to necessarily be a course. I think it can be other types of experiences as well. So I've been looking at how many different universities are creating design studios and institutes and ways of promoting group creativity within their campus. I've been working on that here at BYU and created the Creativity, Innovation, and Design Group, which is a group of about 50 or so faculty members who are working to promote interdisciplinary creativity on campus. As part of that, we've been building a library studio housed in the middle of campus, right in the library, where multiple disciplines can come together and work on creative projects together. We've had some great success there and continue to work in that area and have some potential research opportunities related to this. I've also done research related to the Center for Animation here at BYU, which is well known for not only being the best animation program probably in the country, but for also being one that emphasizes group projects rather than individual ones. The other thing that I do a lot of work on is related to open badge credentialing. I do this with my IPT 286 class, which is Technology Education for Pre-Service Teachers. Open badges, we feel like, provide a nice credential that's different than some of the other credentials you can get through grades, diplomas, certificates, and things of that nature. The reason I like open badges is because they embed important metadata into the actual credential itself. So no longer is your credential separated from the evidence and the criteria and the reviewer who issued that credential. It's all in one, and that I think is very powerful and has some powerful implications for education. These show some of the badges that we use here in our IPT 286 class. So if you teach for me with IPT 286, you'll get to use badges as part of your teaching. But then there's also opportunities to do research as part of what we're doing with the pre-service teachers. Here's just another example of what we try and do. One thing that we think is kind of unique about the badge approach is how it allows us to focus on a mastery approach to education and a more competency-based approach to education. So we're pretty excited about that. The last thing that I do research on is social presence online and how we can help online learning to be more social and interactive and collaborative. So I've done research on how we can do feedback, and that's what this slide is related to. Is we gave a presentation at ACT about the content, timing, and delivery of feedback that will promote social presence in a class. We've also done other projects related to video discussions and other things to promote social presence in online learning. So if you're interested in online learning, but the social aspects of it, I'd also be happy to talk to you about that. Thank you again.
And I think that is it. So if you have any questions, feel free to talk to us. And soup is ready downstairs. So have a good day.
Perfect. Oop. That wasn't very good timing, sorry. I don't know what happened. All right. Well, no, I think you're able to stay in it as long as you want, until like I log out of it. But I wonder, maybe it's internet or just I don't know. Dude, you did really good at the spectacular, man. It was awesome. It was awesome. Are you? Did you just have a cold? Thank you.
This was a good day for you.
I know. That's why I came. All right. I'll go test it out for you. Feel better, man. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.